Now that we have installed and learned the Angular CLI project, let's see how Angular uses these files and start working with components. The main.ts file, which is over here, is the main file that loads up everything in your application. So let's start with this one. Most of the time, you don't have to mess with this file. The first thing you will notice here is that we have a series of import statements. Angular itself is modular, which means that it itself is built with combination of smaller codes. In order to use the different features, you will have to look them separately using import statement. Most of these files are imported directly through the files that we have created. The first import statement are imported from your Angular library. The next import is a local import. That's why it is separated from the above. This is the app module that the CLI generates for you. This is not something that you created by yourself. The next thing that loads up the modules that boots up the application that uses the app module that was generated automatically. Now let's open the app.module.ts file. And let me minimize the command prompt over here. This is where we set up parameters for the entire application as well as the application logic. In addition to the usual import statements, you will also see a padding for a decorator. It's a JavaScript ES6 pattern that takes an object in describing the application. Here you are identifying the components you are going to be using in this module as well as any other library you are using from somewhere else. Here you can see we have something called app component. And that was automatically generated for us. That refers to the file on the left that was imported from the top. And at the end, you can see that we have an export statement that exports the module that we created here. This is the same thing that has been imported in the main.ts file. Now let's look at the app.component.ts file. Now, just like the app.module.ts, the app.component.ts file is also built with imports, decorators, and exports. But it's a little different. You can see here we are declaring a decorator, but the object is a little different from the module. Inside the decorator, we have an item called selector with a value app root, which is over here. The app root identifies as an HTML tag where the component will be installed. You can see that in the index.html file over here. The next thing in the app.component.ts file is the template and the styles. Here you can see we are using an external file to load the HTML, and we are also using an external file to use the CSS file. But you can write all that code here as well. Now let's look at the export statement, which is over here. It's kind of look different here. We are creating a variable. Now this variable here is accessible in the HTML. If you go to the CSS file over here, you can see that it's completely empty. But we can apply the CSS here and it will only apply to that particular component itself. Now let's go to the app.component.html. Now let's go back to the app.component.ts file. Now here you can see that we have a app.component.html file. Now let's go to app.component.html, and if you scroll all the way down, you can find a HTML tag at the bottom, which basically says title. Now here is just a simple regular HTML, except it's using double curly braces to create an expression. And inside that we are using a variable called title. Now this is the same title that we declared in the app.component.ts file. Finally, you can see that we have app.component.spec.ts. Now this is the test file that Angular has written for us. If you want, we can remove all of the contents of this file and start from scratch. And we're not going to need the app.component.ts file, so I'm just going to delete that. And we don't need the app.component.css, so I'm going to delete that one too. Okay, so let's go to app.component.html, and I'm going to get rid of all of the stuff which we have here, and we're going to start from scratch. Now here I'm just going to type in h1, and inside that we will add the double curly braces, and we're going to use that title that we created. Let's save that. Now, if you go to the browser, you can see that we have an error. So that's because we removed some files, but we did not update the app.component.ts file. Let's get back to our code and let's go to the app.component.ts file here. And you can see that we removed the style URL. So I'm going to get rid of that one and let's save that. Now, if you get back to the browser, and you can see we have Angular project showing up. Now let's try changing the value of the title in the app.component.ts file, and we'll change it to welcome to Angular. So let's get back to our code, and here I'm going to change this one to welcome to Angular project. Let's save that. If I get to the browser, and you can see that we have our title showing up in the browser. Now, in order to make this work, you need to make sure that your ng serve is always running. So in case if it doesn't work, you can press Ctrl+C. That will stop the running server, and you can type in ng serve again, and this will run the server again, and you will see the project working. Okay, now the ng serve is running, so I can get back to the browser and hit refresh, and you can see it's running. Now, if I make any changes to the project, so let's say welcome to the Angular project, and if I add an exclamation mark here, save that, and if I get back to the browser, and you can see without even refreshing the project, I got this exclamation mark added to this file.